Good morning. This is May 18, Wednesday, and we're going to begin with a work session this morning on the Clean Water Commission, and that will be immediately followed by our council time agenda. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page for the latter, there are a couple of changes that let's take a look at for that agenda. One is the executive session that is shown as item 2. I would ask that we could move that down to the bottom with number 8 so that the two executive sessions come together. Then we don't have to disband for council time twice. If there are no objections to that, then I would also ask that 3.5, the vacant buildable lands model, be moved to the 25th, and that way it will be discussed before we take it up in public hearing, and then it would not be discussed today in open session. Are there any objections to that? Okay, those two things will stand. And so Justin Maynard, I understand that you are going to kick it off for us with the Clean Water Commission. Welcome, and thank you for doing this morning.
Thank you, Chair Bowerman, and thank you for your time this morning, Council. I'm Justin Maynard. I'm our Clean Water Division Manager. I think you've all seen me at some point or another before. I'm here with the Clean Water Commission members. They're going to present their 2021 annual report. We do have others in attendance. Brendan Addis, the chair of the council, will be presenting to you. Others in attendance are Jeff Kasenich, Marie Lamana, Matt Jones, and Sandra Martin Bame. I hope I pronounced everybody's last names correctly. Brendan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Rebecca will be flipping through your slides for you, so just give her a signal as you want to move through.
Roger that. Thank you, Justin, very much. All the supporting staff. Rebecca, I'll try to communicate over for the slides there. And thank you, Council, for attending and hearing a presentation today. So I'll try to be respectful of everybody's time and go through this efficiently and not be reading every slide as we go here. So just to start, some of you are probably familiar already with what the Clean Water Commission's role is, but brief review of that. It is a volunteer citizen board working as an advisory capacity for the county. We're working closely with the Clean Water Division, communicating with them and providing advice back on anything clean water related, surface water related in particular. That's to say not drinking water, but surface water quality issues in our county. Next slide, please. This is a list of the 2021 commissioners. Some of these members have moved on. Most of them still with us, though. We have several new members on our board. Great group of people. We've really managed over the last few years to get a wonderful team of citizens that come from a variety of different backgrounds with a knowledge and interest in clean water for our community, and that really has helped serve us being a better advisory board and working with the Clean Water Division itself. Next slide. A quick review of our mission and values that drive us. So the Clean Water Commission's mission is to bring together residents and various entities of government and business and nonprofits in our community, as I mentioned, working towards clean water quality and protection and enhancement in our community, and all towards a vision of a self-sustaining, healthy watershed that benefits Clark County citizens, also our wildlife and environment. And although it doesn't say it here, the ecological function, the role and service that a clean water system serves to our community, just beyond the aesthetic elements that we all appreciate. And we drive towards that with our core values of stewardship, cooperation, and transparency. Next slide. Going into our 2021 accomplishments. 2020 and 2021 were a little difficult for all of us, with COVID-19 kind of changing our normal modes of operation and ability to engage with the public. We did explore a lot internally with some of our operations and objectives, so some long-term approaches, conversations and exploring how to connect our mission with environmental justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, really just looking at how we're engaging with our community as a whole. Also creating a better framework for our working groups and our action plans. I'll kind of discuss this a little bit further here in some of the following slides. Our education and public interaction, during the pandemic, we were still finding ways to be engaged. As a meeting like today shows, the ability to meet remotely has actually added to a lot of attendance. So our group ended up attending over 27 different technical and educational presentations this last year. And we continued working on projects such as developing new bylaws to make it easier for midterm replacements in our group, and identifying different priorities for our watersheds. Also, as per usual, just maintain our compliance and accessibility. All of our members are OPMA certified, so following the rules as a county body. Next slide, please. So some of our accomplishments, we have 3 working groups. The first one being the partnership group, worked on developing mission and goal drafted action plans. This is kind of helping to get our working groups have kind of a better set of goals each year and how we execute it, and to also be a little bit more adaptable to different issues that come up. Also initiated communication exchange between various organizations to identify contacts in the local Chinese American groups for a creek renaming project. And I'm going to discuss that a little bit more in detail here when we get to the research group. And we also, the partnership group also attended the Stormwater Partners annual meeting. The following slide is for our education outreach working group. The group still attended multiple neighborhood association meetings when permitted and able. Maintaining that connection with our community members, the neighborhood associations has been a great way to kind of reach out for those that are active and maintain our presence on a community level with them. Also investigated feasible implementation of the Salmon Safe certification for county parks. Real briefly, Salmon Safe certification is a series of different steps that a community, or municipality can take to get Salmon Safe certified. There's some different hurdles with it and some costs involved that I think ultimately that certification process wasn't necessarily moving forward, but it was a really good exercise in looking at some of the practices and how those can be implemented anyways in our practices with county parks. We also volunteered to assist staff with the MPDS permits with regard to behavioral change programs. So this is a lot of reaching out to citizens and residents on changes that they can make that help mitigate water impacts. And further facilitation of DEI training for the entire Clean Water Commission. And next, with the research group, I mentioned a second ago the effort reaching out to the Chinese American group on what you may have seen there as a creek renaming effort. This was a project that came onto our radar a little bit of when we were spinning our wheels in a lull between projects. And one thing that came to the table was a conversation around China Ditch and Shanghai Creek. These are 2 tributaries to the Lacklands Creek watershed. And this trip set off a research project that we looked into the history of the names behind these 2 creeks and are working with some local groups on doing a research project. I know, and this says renaming. That was kind of the initial motivation was, what's the history of this name and does it really reflect the values of our community that we want? But where the direction of it is going at this point is just trying to research more about the history of Chinese Americans in our community and better historical representation of that. So more to come on that in this coming year. And as we get into questions, happy to answer more about this project in particular. Next slide, please. Moving through to our action plan for 2022. Advocating the county-focused policy planning and projects with a greater emphasis on achieving healthy watersheds. We continue to invite staff and water resource groups to give presentations. It has helped greatly in our understanding of what's going on in the community, how our Clean Water Division operates, and I think has really fostered a good relationship between the Clean Water Commission and the team there with the division. Continuing the research, as I mentioned, on the creek naming project and working with stakeholders to create some meaningful education for our community on that. There was also a project with analyzing the use of pesticides and alternatives. This is in support of efforts that members of the Clean Water Division were working on, and we are looking to participate in some outreach efforts on that part. And also looking to create better archives and kind of a draft history for the Clean Water Commission. This really ties in with training as we meet every other month with 2 special sessions. You end up with only so many meetings over the course of the year. And when we do have turnover or new members that come on board, we're trying to really create a better training to get them up to speed quickly and working with our projects. And next we go into recommendations. Kept them short here. 2 main ones that we had. The first is just a whole watershed planning focus to look at the prevention and conservation of clean water rather than just chasing corrective measures. And often in communities end up being faced with correcting impacts to clean water, and you end up with a continually kind of chasing your tail on that. And so there's a motivation to not just look at planning projects or development on a parcel by parcel location, but how that impacts a larger watershed, and then also taking actions ahead of time to where you're not just having to do mitigation work. And lastly, common request is always the support of budget and staffing to help meet those MPDS requirements. There is a great team at the Clean Water Division and the work they've been doing. And as per usual, we always encourage the support of their work and their efforts. So that is the quick wrap up there. I'll open it up to questions from the council at this point.
I have questions, Madam Chair. If I may, can you hear me?
I can
Yes,
hear
but
you.
I was on mute. Go ahead, Counselor.
Yeah, so I would appreciate some detailed on kind of the state of where we're at. We're after a year into ecology's testing of Lacamas watershed. I haven't heard a word about it. We haven't heard a while about Whipple Creek and Burn Creek on some of the E. coli levels, some of the DNA testing that was done. These point sources are of pollution contributing to the lack of clean water in our watersheds is very concerning. And so I'd like kind of an update on some detail on that. And that relates to the Conservation Corps' Conservation District's Poop Smart program, manure management, composting. I don't know where we're at on any of that, other than it's kind of treading water with the public. We just signed or are signing the Vancouver Lakes study. The question related to that is, is your office going to be one of the stakeholders as they look at Vancouver Lake and the sources of remedy for its cleanup?
Oh, with a couple of questions there that I can address. Moving backwards a little bit, with Vancouver Lake, I don't know to what level we will be involved. I'm sure we will be paying, attention to what's happening with that. We did have a presentation this last year, I believe it was, with regard, that was in particular to invasive plants. I think the milfoil focus on Vancouver Lake. So the details of what you're mentioning there that'll be coming out, I'm not 100% sure, but I know we would be interested in hearing more and advocating, where we can on that. With regard to, you also mentioned the Poop Smart program and the Conservation District's efforts. And I know that is focused primarily at this point on the East Fork of the Lewis. Last I was aware, they had been beginning in partnership with Clean Water Division on testing to try to locate kind of key areas for their outreach efforts. And that's really kind of targeting a combination of point source and non-point source runoff. I think most of the funds from ecology that they're going to be working with are targeted on septic corrections and then livestock mitigation of runoff. That project, from my understanding, is a bit of a pilot project to where based on the successes and correcting any failures they have with it, to expand that over to Lacamas as well, and hopefully other watersheds in the future. The testing that Ecology has been doing on Lacamas, I'm also not familiar on the details of what they've gotten back from that. Like you, I know that they were doing that and had been in the process, so I'm not sure where they're at on presenting those results. And as far as the overall water quality within the county, and one thing I would recommend, if it hasn't been done already, is getting a presentation to you from the Clean Water Division. We recently saw one from the team over there with their storyboard. It's interactive, and I believe they were going to launch that to be available to the public, if not this week, in the coming weeks. And that's a really great tool to be able to see interactively the water quality testing that we have for our watersheds and sub-watersheds, as well as information that kind of shows what those impacts are. So I think that's a great starting point to get a good visual from it. I was a lot there. I don't know if that answers most or any of your questions there on that, but if I can clarify on any more of them as well.
I can also add a little bit to that. On Vancouver Lake, I know Herrera is starting to reach out right now to form their advisory groups. So they're kind of in the early phases of that anyway, and I think they're identifying those stakeholder groups. I'm sure the commission will land on their list to at least reach out to. On Lacamas, I believe last I saw there was an approved ecology quality assurance plan for their sampling that I think was finalized October last year. And I'm going from memory there, so I'd have to confirm that. I believe their investigation is planned to go into this year before they end up presenting on it. That's the last I heard. I know, obviously there's a lot of stakeholders in that, and ecology will, in theory, bring everybody to the table, including the Clean Water Division. So I'm sure we'll hear from them on that probably later this year, I think is what we're expecting. And on that last point, Brendan's point about the story map, we did present that to you guys a couple of weeks ago. I can give a little bit of an update on that. I think one of the things that we told you we would do is present it to the commission and get their feedback. The presentation went pretty well, aside from the tools misbehaving a little bit during a GIS update. But that's been fixed. We've actually made some tweaks to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and we're planning on pushing it out next week with some instructional videos on how to use it. And that was the Stream Health Report, was the full name of that. So.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councillor Rylander.
Good morning, Brendan. I was on the Clean Water Commission for 4 years and chair for 2, so I'm it's near and dear to my heart. Point of interest. Back when I stepped away, the county had been undergoing some significant budget challenges at the time, and there had been a history of stream quality monitoring throughout the county that was scaled back, as I recall at the time. I'm just curious as to whether there's any current follow-up. Have we been able to provide additional funding so we can go back and make sure we're using that historical data, because it was pretty significant and gave a long-term view of past looking into the future. So I'm just curious as to whether you're aware of anything along those lines.
Thank you for the question. In relation to how it is currently in comparison to historical levels, I might defer to Justin to be able to elaborate on that a little bit more. I know most of our meetings as an advisory board, it's the typical, wishing there were more resources, as does everybody, wishing there was more resources for doing more of that work. I know my take on seeing the amount of testing that we are able to do on the county level seems somewhat limited. We do the best with what we got, but you're kind of taking various shots on the map to try to give yourself a snapshot of what you have for overall stream quality and over time. But into more detail to your question, I don't know, Justin, if you have more that you can add to that as well.
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to when you speak about the scaled back monitoring work. it has been scaled back up from that time period that you're talking about. We have gone back to monitoring some sites that weren't monitored for, I want to say, 3 years or so. Again, working from memory there, starting in 2017 or 2018, I believe they ramped back up on some of that work that they were doing before, and they started revisiting sites on a rotating panel, in addition to the ones that were actually long-term sites. We're starting to actually see trends, meaningful trends emerging from all that data collection. So staff are really diving into what that data can tell us now. We're, I think, in a fortunate position to be able to do that at this point. The update to the stream health report, which originally I think the last update was 2010, and before that 2002. We've moved to this digital story map format. That data, that's kind of acting as a bit of a data repository, and it's public facing. So there's query tables. You can see what data is collected and where and when. It's a really handy tool. We're kind of hoping to see a little bit more ability to update it more continuously with the tools that we have now, instead of having to compile a paper or PDF report every year, which is very static. What we're working with now is a little bit more dynamic, and I think especially as more trends emerge as we go through the next couple of years. I think last I spoke to the monitoring group, they felt like trends were starting to show in a couple of particular spots, but they expect to see a little bit more of that over the next few years as more data comes in.
Thank you.
Other questions and comments from council?
Well, I see that they're asking for recommendations based on the answers to my questions. My recommendation is, first and foremost, yeah, let's jump on that Vancouver Lake study as a stakeholder. I think we need to have a closer relationship with ecology. You know, my recollection may be faulty, and this pandemic has been somewhat of a Groundhog Day, and so kind of losing track of time. But my understanding that the East Fork study by ecology was done about 2 years ago, and then they lifted and shifted and began a brand new enormous study of the Lacamas watershed. And that first year of testing should have been completed last fall. So I'm not sure we're keeping track with exactly what ecology is doing. And that work is, I mean, it's all related to clean water in this county. So I feel like there's a disconnect. And this isn't the first time I've asked about information about the Lacamas testing. I still haven't gotten it yet. Eventually I'll hit someone that actually knows, or ecology will respond. So I'm hoping they haven't dropped that project, but I think we're about a year behind on what ecology is doing within our county.
I definitely know they haven't dropped the project, and the last ecology member I had spoken with, Molly Gleason, was involved in the testing and had some information on that. So for what efforts I can help with that, I'd be happy to work with Justin and reaching out and see, you know, if we can get more information back to you on that, because I do know the efforts are underway and the focus is there.
And I'll just add, I was able to find that quality assurance project plan for the Lacamas. This is for the Lacamas Creek area upstream of the lake, but it's for bacteria, temperature, and nutrient source assessment. That was published September 2021, and I believe that lays out their plan and a schedule for the work that is ongoing. Even if they did start doing some testing and field work prior to that, their schedule does have field work completion in October 2021, with lab analysis going on in November, and then some more technical analysis and data quality assessment through October 2022. So you know, I'm going off of a document here that they published in September 2021. Clearly, things may have changed a little bit since then, but their plan is to have that technical analysis at least somewhat completed later this year, and then distribute that to external reviewers and a final draft early 2023.
Okay, thank you, Justin. That's much appreciated.
Are there other recommendations? I believe not, Justin. So thank you for the report. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't believe so. Thank you guys for your time, council, and thank you, Brendan, for actually doing the heavy lifting here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the support. And again, thank you, council, and everybody in attendance today.
We always look forward to hearing more because clean water is so important. Okay, let's switch gears then to the legislative session discussion.